From the United Nations Office to the African Union, this is She Stands for Peace. I am Dr. Yemisi Akimbobola, and in this podcast, I speak with thought leaders and peace builders who share their reflections and best practices towards achieving objectives of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in Africa. And today I'm joined by Hamsatu Allamin, founder and executive director of the Allamin Foundation for Peace and Development. Hajia Allamin joins me from Maiduguri, Nigeria, and we have a conversation about partnerships in peace building and reconciliation. Hajia Allamin, it's a pleasure to speak with you today. You have been actively involved in peace building and reconciliation in the locations impacted by Boko Haram, but your activism actually started well before there was any such a thing as Boko Haram because girls' education has always been important to you. So tell us about those early years, how girls' education became so important for you and interventions that you took to address it, particularly also in mobilizing other women towards the same cause.
Thank you very much, MC. It's a pleasure, in fact, talking to you. I can vividly remember when my father has it very tough with his own mother and my mother, who don't want me to go to school, being the first daughter of the family. So I can see my father trying to convince them, my grandmother crying, my mother shedding tears that why should I be taken to school? And my father is saying, no, the world is really changing. In fact, women, girls need to be educated. So my father now enlightened me, although I have to persevere because I don't want to hurt his feeling. So I was married, and when I was married, they don't want me to go to school also. So I had struggled. My father has to be calling me on phone daily, sending me my sisters to send me a token that under no circumstances should I stop going to school. And that's how I went to the university. In fact, almost every year and a half, I was having a baby. It was not easy. I struggled. And then when I finished and graduated, I secured employment. Then another problem started. My husband has to be go to the village now. Having coming from the royal family of that community, his father died, and then that title was given to him. It was a very big challenge. There was only one secondary school in that community, and that was solely male secondary school because girls don't even go to school. Having gotten employment, I was now transferred to that community when I was the only female teacher in the school too. It was terrible, honestly. It's to the point of I'm almost depressed. But then, having thought a lot, I said, no, that's not the best. I have already had 4 children. I have to make lemonade out of the lemon that I find myself in. So I said, I should now mobilize and then see how I can bring the other women, the local women of the community, most of whom have never even gone to primary school. I mobilized them as the village chief's wife. They were happy to come to me. When they come, I will now come out and then sit down on the floor. They were just totally amazed. Then I will be talking to them about education, and they were looking. I said, it is because of that education that I am now bringing myself to your level, and that's what I want your daughters to be. So before you know it, honestly, I am a role model to them. They admire me, and then therefore now our focus will be how do we now get girls to schools. Some of them have even been their wedding days have been fixed. They have been put on henna decoration. We have to go and scuttle that arrangement and then take the girl to school. And because of me, the school authority has to leave the girls among the boys to be day students, to come as day students. And when I do that, these parents will now abandon the whole girl to me because they don't want to invest their resources to educate a girl. And then I use my salary to sponsor them. Honestly, I have sponsored several girls, and then the other lesser chiefs, seeing that the wife of the paramount ruler there is encouraging that there is nothing they can do but to give support. And my husband then, in fact, gave us all the support. In fact, so that when they go on their campaigns and others, they will be talking to parents. So we help enrollment of children into schools generally because apathy to secular education itself, even among the boys, was a great challenge, not to talk of girls.
We can describe you as a gender activist, as an author, and you also started your work in peace building by working with young men in your community. So tell us about those early years of Boko Haram and events that shaped how you work in human rights defending and peace building, especially how this began to shape your understanding of who the partners and stakeholders were in peace building and reconciliation.
The story of Boko Haram started as far back as 1992 when I started hearing community women and then youths, including men, talking about a group that is professing Western education as forbidden. And then one day in the evening, I got the opportunity when I was in the village to see the leader of the Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf himself, preaching in front of a mosque in front of our house. So I went out and looked at him. He was talking about now completely condemning secular education and then talking about women education and others, and then condemning even immunization at that time. So gradually, as I come to the city, also now my husband was transferred, and then even my own sons, my own sons who at that time they were very young. They were telling me, Mama, you need to listen to what these people are saying. They are really preaching Islam. Haba, I have to now, if I start focusing on my children, how to see that I can bar them from attending. And the most interesting part discovery I made later was all those children who were friends to my two sons at that time were all part and parcel, were all recruits of that Boko Haram later. Some of them, in fact, abandoned the university when they just enrolled. But God has helped me, in fact, to in fact secure my sons so that were not recruited and indoctrinated. So gradually, then as the violence now ensued when the leader was killed and they went underground. And then they started reimagining around late 2010, started reimagining and then started their targeted killing in 2011. Aha. So that was when gradually from 2011 they were targeting people, especially religious leaders, community leaders, security agents, and others. And then the situation started escalating, violence started escalating, people started relocating, everybody was running to leave us. Even I was offered the opportunity to leave the place. At that time, I was working for the British Council. Then I said, honestly, if a whole community, every man in that community will now, who has resources, can now take his family and relocate and leave us. No international agency, no journalists, no reporters, no nothing. And at a point, our airport was even closed down. And then telecommunication was completely cut off. I said, then who mobilizes and initiates any effort to scale this situation down? So that was the time then I was reaching out to people. So I said, let me start with knowing who these boys, the violent boys, are themselves and understand why they are doing this kind of thing they are doing. So for the government, as everybody was running, the government now, the national government responded by creating a security outfit. They call it Joint Task Force of soldiers, policemen, and what have you, and then brought them and stationed them in our community. And then, because those JTF don't know us, they don't know anybody. All they see at that time, the Boko Haram boys were living within the community in their parents' houses. So they will go and attack these soldiers and run back into the community and disappear. When they follow them, they wouldn't see anybody. So out of frustration, those soldiers then started burning our houses. They spread petrol and then set houses on fire. And whoever comes out, if it is a male child, there and then, if he stops, he is arrested. If he runs, he is shot dead. And the women are not even spared of other abuses and molestation even then. So I said, no, I have to know who these boys are because during my interaction with the women, they will tell me the son of so has joined, the other, this guy from this house. So they all know because my people have a saying, if you want to know anything that is happening in the community, ask the women. But although nowadays, even men now know. So I have had a lot from women. So I said, I must know these boys physically. As this violence escalates now, These women now started even encouraging their young ones to join the insurgents because number one, there is resources that accompanies joining, and then two, the mismanagement of the situation by the soldiers calls for the need for revenge among the community members on the soldiers. So some of them, the women themselves become informants. Some started even joining, even training of guns, handling weapons and others. So now, as I now focus to now understand and know who the Boko Haram were, and then my focus now shifted to the women also. When I go to the communities, downtown communities where these boys were heavily recruited, I will see them with their guns toting. At first, they were even threatening me. You are also a product of secular education and others. Then gradually, they understood that I am harmless. And then when I go see me, they will even come to me holding the guns folded in one hand and then talking to me, expressing their anger over what the soldiers did to the community, the women, and there. And then I will have some chats with them. And then that is how now I really understood that no matter how bad or vicious or violent you consider someone, that person needs to be listened to. Now, having seen these boys, I now change my focus to the women to see how I can now make them to change their focus from the seeking of violence and then encouraging our young, innocent ones to joining the violent group. And then, yes, really, that I succeeded. In fact, some of the women that I was able to bring out now I made them now leaders of my network. Together we are mobilizing, together we are building movement of women and then identifying affected people and then bringing in whatever interventions that we are going to make. Today, those civilian JTFs, the first group of them will tell you that I am the only first person who ever started talking to them and then seek for any intervention from elsewhere to support them in Borno State. But rather, the Boko Haram itself began to change into a hydra-headed monster with several heads. At that time, it was a political government, politicians using them, criminals joining them. uh, Everybody have hired assassins and what have you, detonating bomb here and there against their opponents, all in the names of Boko Haram. And then the criminality and then the violence become unprecedented because humans were slaughtered just anyhow within Maiduguri. Then they even started going into people's houses, abducting young girls. They will tell the parents, seems you don't want to marry your daughter, we are taking her as wives. And then the society started calling it Auren Markas, that is the marriage of Markas. And Markas is the first community of Boko Haram. And then parents will have started now relocating their daughters from outskirts area into the cities. That's how I came to know of it. It was really terrible. It was a terrible, terrible situation. Then now I have to focus on the women. And then since no elder of influence is willing to commit to bringing an end to this situation, I said, let me focus on the affected people themselves. Of course, the Boko Haram has been dislodged by the young men, their fellow young men, and then they have left the city. So let me focus on affected people to see what difference I can bring. Then now I now started creating a network, social networks of affected people. Well, I started with the victims of disappearances because the soldiers at that time arrest indiscriminately, and once arrested, that's the end of any youth that is arrested. Some of them is now getting to 10 years, no information, no nothing about them, and they are in hundreds of thousands. So now I now created what I call the Jire Dole. Jire Dole in Kanuri means justice or truth is a must. Lavia Dole, which means peace by all means. So we said if peace is by all means, but there will never be peace without justice. Because in this network now, I have over 18,000 women now registered.
Well, we're going to talk about some of your networks that you've developed, but I just want to summarize. I think what you're saying to me is that your approach to partnership in peace building and reconciliation has been about empathy and about inclusion. Empathy in terms of understanding the victims' perspectives, the survivors, the perpetrators, and even bringing in elders in the community. So you were able to build a trust with young boys who were kind of enlisting and joining into this ideology that Boko Haram was perpetuating, to the extent that some of them were calling you mama or auntie, right? Because your approach to partnership was inclusive and it had empathy.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
you
that's the
just,
only way to do it, MEC. Yes,
yeah,
you cannot
absolutely.
include the other person and say you are going to build peace. And then you cannot include a person and say you are going to understand a situation. So it has to
Mm.
be all inclusive.
And
Yes.
you've created some of the networks you've talked about already. So, the network of civil society organizations for peace, the Women, Peace and Security Network as the voice of the voiceless. And then also, you talked about the social networks of victims of disappearance and survivors of Boko Haram abductions. So, a number of kind of really important initiatives. With this experience behind you, and in this wider context of the international women, peace, and security community's approach to partnership. So, comparing your kind of experience and your approach in Maiduguri in this particular context with the wider international community, women, peace, and security community's approach to partnership. How did you build that trust? And what do you want the international community to learn from this, to reimagine, to rethink what we consider partnership in peace building and reconciliation?
About this trust and then team building, you mentioned my network of civil society. That was even before I created the network of the victims and their relations. That was a situation was going back. I thought the civil society, being those on the ground, will now be able to, if organized, to be the voice of the voiceless so that they can speak for the helpless ordinary masses who don't have resources, who don't have our influence or whatever, any voice. That is how I brought the 68 civil society together into the network. And out of that network, then when someone enlightened us about the UN Security Council 1325 and then the Women Peace and Security Network, then we extracted about 28 of them that are women led and then created the WPS network with funding which the NSRP now supports across. And then this network of civil society now felt, well, this is not their mission. So after all, they now went and registered themselves into another organization and then lost the focus I intended them to be. So that is how I now came to set up these networks of affected people, because being affected people, they will never relent, they will never be tired, they will never be afraid. They are just interested in pursuing the cause. That is the cause that brought them into this network, the losses and then the violations that they suffered. So now I have the Jire Dole network, where we have a network of mothers of victims of disappearances, of wives of victims of disappearances, who are all IDP women separated from their husbands and the husbands were arrested. Now it is getting to 8 to 9 years, no information. Then, as some of the victims also regain their freedoms, then we realize that there are a lot of issues of human rights abuses, violations are related to it. So we now created a network of former detainees, men, women, including children, because even the minors were arrested with their parents and then kept in children's cell, where the grown up among them even alleged sexual violations. So we have these three networks of former detainees. Then we have the network of victims or survivors of abduction. You know, Boko Haram, only the Chibok girls were known to the world. But then even in my small NGO now, I have about 4,000 of them registered. All girls who were abducted either in their houses or in their communities or along the roads by Boko Haram in the course of their expeditions. And then they started coming back. They cut across all the localities. So we now created a social network for them. And worse for them, when they come back with their babies or pregnancies, even their own families reject them. Not to talk of the larger society, they stigmatize them. So we now created a social network for them. And then of recent, because of that trust and relation we build with these women, they started revealing a lot that, some of them, when they ran from the Boko Haram or were rescued from the Boko Haram, they and then hand over to the Nigerian security operatives in detention too. They suffer worse ordeals sometimes, because many of them tell me Nigerian soldiers are worse than Boko Haram. It's very unfortunate. And then many of them have come out with babies for us. So now I have created a network of invisible children, that is, invisible children who were conceived and born while their mothers are in captivity with the Boko Haram, and then some while their mothers are in detention facility. Because even in the Boko Haram enclave, they suffer multiple rapes. Hardly will you get a woman who will tell you that she knows the father of the child she is carrying. Some of them are carrying three, two, and others. So these children are now, many of the women are back. We are not trying to profile the children, but then the mothers, at least these children need attention too, so that through the mothers, the world will know the existence of these invisible children, because they have to be catered for. And the most interesting thing that I discovered about these children, for out of about almost 300 that we registered now, 85% of them are male children. So when they grow, and then they are in numbers, communities are calling us to go and register such children. But because of our safety, we cannot even reach there now. So I brought them now together, about six faith-based organizations, enlighten them on the need for us to come together and then address the issues. So we brought these women faith-based organization together, who now advise me to bring in the youth faith-based organization, because they said the youth are the ones that are now taken and made the bangers of all destruction and whatever. So we now brought in a youth organization like the Girls and Boys Brigade, the Fellowship of Christian Students, the Muslim Student Societies, and others, all into our midst, so that we build their capacity, understand the situation that the Allamin Foundation is battling with, so that together, as Christians and Muslims, we can face this problem and then solve it together.
So, if there was that one thing that you want the international women, peace, and security community to learn in rethinking how they think about partnership and peace building and reconciliation, what would that one thing be?
What I want people to understand is that yes, it is about women, peace, and security, but it's not about women only. Definitely, women alone, yes, much impacted are the women and the children, but then the solution cannot be achieved with women solely working on this. So therefore, what international community should understand is to impact collectively, identify the most active women who are making a difference in this, then identify men also as ready partners and allies who will move together. There are gender sensitized men. There are people who are really in all their approaches, they are gendered. So that together they will give us the necessary support. As women peace builders, we can build, because I know some men are even interested, so if women are leading, so that they can follow, and they have never despised me. All of them are happy with what I am doing. And look at the youth in the community. The youth have taken up arms to go up after the Boko Haram. But then now, as a woman, I have reached out to them. They are rallying me, calling me Mama CJTFs. And even the violent ones who said Boko is completely haram. But that violent one, believe you me, is more sensible when it comes to inclusivity. eh, in the society, because the women they carried, they included them, they gave them responsibility. The women now consider this indoctrination and whatever as empowerment. They teach them how to handle weapons, they give them responsibility of guarding fellow women. So even the heinous crimes of even slaughtering a person, a women are given that responsibility to slaughter their fellow women, so that even the violent ones have not forgotten about us. So therefore, international community should realize and then try to understand the different contexts people are operating.
Hmm. Yeah. So inclusion and then also sharing of best practices, which is one of the objectives of this podcast. Now, I want to return to a couple of things that you mentioned earlier on, because we can't have this conversation without talking about the Chibok girls, particularly because the abduction of those girls in 2014 was both symbolic and within a wider context. That much of the people that rallied around the Bring Back Our Girls campaign on social media we're not all kind of aware of. So the context that several hundreds of thousands of children have been abducted throughout this period of Boko Haram, including several girls that were abducted before the Chibok girls themselves were abducted. And even Amnesty International estimates that over 1,500 children have been abducted by Boko Haram since 2014, which was the year the Chibok girls happened. And you were part of a group of 13 Muslim women that made the first international press conference about 6 days after the girls were abducted. And that subsequently led to the Bring Back Our Girls campaign as well. And in episode 13 of this podcast, I actually interviewed Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, and we talk about the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. So, and I'm highlighting the fact that you were Muslim women because of what you said earlier on about this narrative, this religious divide narrative, the idea that these girls have been abducted because they were Christian, and that forms into a global narrative that people could hold on to, that is, it's Muslims attacking the Christians, etc. So with your experience working closely with these communities, what in your experience has been the consequences of such narratives, particularly its impact on the extent to which communities can come together to work in partnership towards peace building and reconciliation?
You have narrated all the story. Really, we are Muslim women, and then who came out to make this press statement 6 days after abduction of the Chibok girls, which gave impetus to the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. So now we mobilize all of them as Muslim dressed in black, went and secluded ourselves and issued the press conference to show. And really, that very night, the kind of encomiums, appreciation, and others that came to us from members of the Christian community, honestly, is very, very overwhelming. One, because yes, now is not what is important is not being a Muslim or the Christians, but then as women, as mothers, and some of us grandmothers are able to take the problem of each other as one, no matter what, we are able to bring this thing to the fore so that the international community, which has assisted the international community to understand that perspective either. And then no matter what, nobody can do it alone, whether Christian or Muslim. Yes, yeah, although Khan also came in later and then they were the ones that gave the statistic, but that is not all, you know. They also need the support of people like us who have to amplify that voice in the initial instance. And then now for the Muslim community, our girls are being abducted in hundreds, severally in all the communities across Borno State. There is no community that whose daughter has not been abducted. But because nobody is mobilizing it, we don't us, nobody has enlightened us. We just stick to the conservative idea that talking about this kind of issue of rape and others is a taboo, that it will spoil a girl or a woman's future. We just zip up our mouths and then look at now the suffering these girls are subjected to. All of them are coming back with babies, with pregnancies. Nobody even knows when they are abducted. Who cares to take care of them? Now they are seeing it. Now the boy girls themselves are bringing it upon us. So no matter what, uh, even if it is the Christians that were reached out to, since they have the avenues, they could have equally done better. But then the mistrust that has been created, that we are against them, they are against us, has gone into people's psyche and head. That cooperation is completely missing until recently, that now everybody's horizon has now been opened to understand that really there is added value in fact building a kind of trust, in strengthening our social cohesion, and then working with one another. We should realize that the enemy is common.
I want to speak beyond the scope of Boko Haram, beyond Borno State, because the conflict that exists in Borno, Yobe, and all those northern states is now engulfed into several other security issues in Nigeria. So you have the violence perpetrated by some people in the Herder community, you have the security that emerges because of the economic situation in the country. Looking forward, what are the stakeholders that you would like to bring into conversation to talk to each other to really advance peace building and reconciliation in the whole country? Who are the people that you would like to bring together?
The number one stakeholders is the security agencies of Nigeria themselves. When they find it even difficult among themselves to communicate and coordinate, what chances do people like us, peace builders, have to now communicate with them and then understand them better? But in spite of all the odds, we have been communicating with the lesser. the smaller officers among the security sectors who tell us their challenges and then the issues involved. But you will never reach the top hierarchy of those security agencies to communicate anything. One may be because they have their focus, which may not be the masses' focus, and then maybe they have their own agenda. For what is this security issues that we are talking about in Nigeria? Now, of recent, so many things are imagined. All these security issues and then the things, violence that we are, they are all senseless violence. From the east to the northwest to the northeast, and then the north central. We have brains. Why should we be killing ourselves for nothing? So whatever that bigger issues should be focused and be addressed. And who will do that? Security, the all the security chiefs, the current one we have a lot of hope and confidence in them. Now, police, they need to listen to, they need to, I'm happy. The head chief of army staff himself, like Irabo, the chief of defense staff, these are people who have started reaching out, because even recently in Maiduguri, when they were having their Salah lunch, people like me were invited to come and be part of. And before, they have invited me with 10 other civil society to be part of them. So that understanding, honestly, unless there is communication between people like us and them, they will not even understand some of the perspectives of the ordinary man, because our relationship is that of fear and apprehension. They are apprehensive about us, we fear them. So how shall we ever communicate and relate to one another the issues that are at stake? And we also, women-led people, civil society, the sincere ones must now reach out to connect with the youth civil society. Youth, every future, every stake is theirs. It is for them that we are working. We women should align with our youth.
So a better coming together of the women-led CSOs, the youth-led CSOs, the security actors, the politicians in a more coordinated conversation and working together. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Ajay. Today we have been talking about how your experiences in work in peace building with communities impacted by Boko Haram, um, towards reconciliation, and your inclusive approach to partnership in this process. So to finish off our conversation, if there was one action you would like our listeners to take today in relation to partnership in peace building and reconciliation, what would that one action be?
One action is proper coordination, cooperation, and unity among actors. That is the number one. Be they national, international, multinational, unilateral, whatever. That is unity, cooperation, and action.
Thank you so much, Hajia, Hamsatu, Allamin. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for listening to She Stands for Peace, the podcast series where thought leaders and peace builders share their reflections and best practices in the women, peace, and security agenda in Africa. I am Dr. Yemisi Akimbobola, and this podcast was produced by the United Nations Office to the African Union with the generous support of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Don't forget to join the conversation using the hashtag She Stands for Peace.